I've got an itch I can't scratch, I'm missing a piece that completes a whole part of me, an open wound scar to see. Everybody come here, gather round, welcome to the freak show, the best in town. What the hell's wrong with me? I don't get along with anybody, honestly. I've been living in my own head constantly, thoughts jumbled round, think I need a new lobotomy. Wait, all these thoughts are too negative. I don't wanna get lost in the sedative. Gotta show them what I got, I'm competitive. You know I'm about to go off, I won't let them win, I'll take a stab. I wanna chase the bag, I wanna weigh, I can change all the things I lack. I gotta face the facts, I got a taste in that. Got me obsessed with the rest, I got an itch to scratch. I'll give up everything. If I could see my dreams, cause I'll do anything to make what a reality. Don't let go.
Hey y'all, I hope y'all are having a wonderful day. So today it starts 3 hours behind Eastern time. I like this time of the year because it's spring, summer, but I don't like this time of the year because late at night, it's like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and it's like 2 o'clock here. And I'm like, what do I do? Everyone's sleeping. And then in the morning time, I'm sleeping for the morning live. So I don't like this time. Hello, hello, hello. So before we talk about, hey Ryan, hey Richie, hey Kaz, hey there, real me too. Before we get into JonBen'et Ramsey, I saw these shorts going through um YouTube, and it's really, really important that we know these signals. So I want to show you guys first. It's 7 parts, but it is a couple saving someone from being kidnapped, abused. We'll see. I'll show y'all right now because it's really, really important that people learn this signal. I don't usually play shorts, so I don't know if it goes bigger than this, but this is part 1. It goes by fast because it's shorts. So this is the core right here that they're going to follow. And it's pretty scary. Here we go.
Okay. Well, next to it, and then what did she say?
Can you see her?
No, not yet.
She just like did that signal for help.
Roll down your window. Roll down your window. Go up next to her. That's her.
That's her. That's her. She did it again. She did it again. She did it again. Okay, what?
That is the signal for being in distress for help.
That's the sign for help.
That's a sign for help. What do we do?
Just back up. Let get behind them. And they,
Okay. Should we follow them?
yeah.
Okay.
Call 911.
Oh my god, I'm gonna cry. I'm freaking out a little bit.
It's okay. It's okay. Just stay right there. Stay right there. Turn your. They don't even have a license plate.
I know. I don't even know how to follow them. Okay.
Go ahead. Call 911. Which car? That car right there?
Yeah, that one. The like silvery brownie color one.
Okay. Well, go up next to it, and then what did she say?
Can you see her?
No, not yet.
She just like did that signal for help.
Roll down your window. Roll down your window. Go up next to her. That's her.
That's her. That's her. She did it.
That's the signal, guys. That's part 1. Here's part 2. That's part 2. Yes, I did subscribe. I had to see to the end and they saved her.
There's no license plate on the car. And the way they were driving was even a little scattered, like it seemed a little chaotic. Okay. Okay. Thank you. All right, bye.
Are they sending someone?
Yeah, they said that they'll send someone in this area, but like, what are we supposed to do? Should we just follow them anyways? They said not to follow them.
I think, well, what if they don't find her?
But, I mean, they're probably not going to find her. There's nothing they can do unless it's like at a house or something. They can't follow a car that's in motion.
Well, just stay back a little bit and see where they go. I just feel bad because she looked really sad.
And it's so hot outside, and they probably have no air in there.
Just don't get too close, okay?
Okay.
Oh, they're turning on Maryland. Yeah, see, I just wonder if we.
That's 3.
Yeah, see, I just wonder if let's stay back and maybe call the cops. I don't know.
Go into a house, or maybe they'll. I don't know. Let's just see what happens.
Just stay back. Don't get too close.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna stop.
Because, like, who knows? They have a gun or something.
That's true.
Did you see the guy?
No, I was only paying attention to her.
Is there anybody in the back seat?
Not that I saw.
And that you sure that's the sign for help, right? We're not just like calling the cops for no reason.
No, I'm 100% positive.
How do you know?
Because I learned about it after I was in my situation, and I wish I would have known that back then.
This, my friends, is why I am showing you this. We have to learn this signal if you do not know it.
Okay. Well. What did the police say they were sending somebody or
Yeah,
what?
they were just like, we'll send somebody, we'll see any units in the general area, but like they can't find a car that's in, you know what I mean?
There's no way because that car looks so basic too.
2 more, you guys.
But no cops.
No license plate. Like there's
Oh, they're
literally
turning.
no
They're
way.
turning. They're turning. Oh, okay. Just stay back, okay? Don't get too close because I don't want him to freak out on you. Okay, maybe that. Okay, just kind of chill. They're getting gas. Yeah, just follow them. Follow them slowly.
The name of that store is named Terribles.
You don't need gas, so should I park somewhere else?
Yeah, just stay right here. Stay right here.
Should I park
No, go over by that other car.
over here?
Yeah, just don't lose them. Yeah.
I'm just gonna back into this parking space
Okay,
like we're going
okay.
in.
What is it?
All right, guys. I think this is
I'm
very
gonna back into this parking space
informative.
like we're going
Okay.
in. You just need a drink. That's all. Just here for some water.
She's okay.
Just sit and wait for a second.
mean,
I can't believe that the driver never noticed them following him.
Just don't want him to see us.
It's okay, pretend like you're on your phone. Oh my god, even the way he's walking, it looks like
Oh, he's going inside.
he's just like looking back at her.
Go. Let's go get her.
Okay, hold on. I just
Go.
want to make sure I'm in the clear. Hold on.
She's still in the car. I think we go. Just no. Drive next to her. Go. Drive up there.
All right, here we go. Part 7, the last part. Look, you guys, this is what you can do if you ever see someone with this
Go, go, go.
signal.
Before he comes back. Yeah, go get her. Go get her. Hurry. Hurry. Hurry.
Szybko, szybko, szybko.
Come on.
Jedźcie, cisza, szybko, szybko, szybko.
What are you saying?
Idź, idź, idź.
What are you
Go!
saying? Go, 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 Angel. Go, 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 go.
Palm to camera and tuck thumb. Trap thumb. This is the signal for help. Please learn it and teach others. I thought this was very informative, you guys. In case you never heard of it. It's been a while since I've even seen it or heard of it. Figured it would be nice to show you guys it in action. I've never seen it in action like that, but now we get to JonBen'et Ramsey and Mr. Scary Gary. I did this live about 7 months ago. I did a live on it. I believe with all my heart, hey, Queen Olive, that he is involved. I hope that after you see this, you will let me know. Keep an open mind when you see this. I know no one has been arrested for her murder. I know there's quote unquote no suspects. But just listen to this with an open mind, please, and then you let me know how you feel about Gary Oliver. It was my fault. The story of Gary Oliver, the sex offender who confessed to the murder of JonBen'et Ramsey. A convicted pedophile who lived near JonBen'et Ramsey at the time of her 1996 killing, Gary Oliver had a deep obsession with the 6-year-old pageant star. Obsession is not the word when you hear what he was caught with, and claimed responsibility for her murder in a series of prison letters. Since 6-year-old JonBen'et Ramsey was brutally murdered in her Colorado home in 96, police have been puzzled as to who might have killed the child pageant star. Over the years, they investigated her parents, her brother, an electrician, a former school teacher named John Mark Carr, and the family's housekeeper. But one of the most compelling suspects is a man named Gary Oliver. In 2019, Oliver, a convicted sex offender, seemingly confessed to JonBen'et's murder in a series of disturbing jailhouse letters and poems, claiming he killed the 6-year-old by accident. Oliver had been obsessed with JonBen'et for years and had hundreds of images of the 6-year-old on his phone when he was arrested in 2016. What's more, Oliver had lived near JonBen'et at the time of her murder and even attended a vigil for her 1-year anniversary of her death. But to this day, Gary Oliver has never been charged with her murder. Born on January 7th, 1964, Capricorn, Gary Howard Oliver grew up in California. Former classmates in high school called him Scary Gary. They later reported he'd often behave erratically, doing strange things like deliberately burning himself, ow, or running screaming through the streets. He sometimes made disturbing jokes about necrophilia. Notably, he also reportedly had a fascination with knots and a bizarre habit of breaking into homes to steal art supplies. After high school, Oliver started exchanging audio cassette tapes with his former classmate like Michael Vale, who we will hear from, as a way to keep in touch. At first, Vale says the recordings were playful and innocent. However, in 1989, Oliver's tapes began to devolve into something more sinister. In one recording, Oliver reportedly pretends to be babysitting a friend's daughter and jokes about awing her. On another tape, he fantasizes about cooking and eating um, children. The tape started getting darker, more depraved, and sicker. It would turn my stomach, Vale told CBS in 2002. Some of the tapes, Vale said, were smeared with blood. He also claims Oliver sent him packages containing hair and posters of missing girls. Gary Oliver's extensive criminal history dates back nearly 3 decades. In 1990, Oliver was arrested in Oregon for sexually abusing a 7-year-old girl. In May 1991, while on probation for this crime, Oliver threatened to kill his mother, Anne Freitag, attempting to strangle her with a telephone cord at their home in Grants Pass, Oregon. According to a 2019 Daily Mail article, the Oregon Department of Corrections wrote in a report, during the course of the assault, Oliver threatened his mother, stating, "I should have killed you a long time ago," and made other threats to kill her. And he also stated that when the sheriffs arrive, they will find you dead. The report goes on to detail how Oliver attacked his mother. Oliver removed a butcher knife from the drawer and had it in his possession. Oliver also pulled a telephone cord loose from a telephone and wrapped it around his mother's neck and began tightening it. Wow. Oliver fled the house before police arrived, but was later caught and arrested. He spent 17 months in jail for the attempted murder and moved to Colorado after his release. Then, in December 1996, a 6-year-old girl was found murdered in her Boulder home. The murder of JonBen'et Ramsey on December 26, 1996, has puzzled investigators for decades and remains a headline-grabbing mystery to this day. The 6-year-old beauty pageant star was initially thought to have been kidnapped by an intruder when her parents, Patsy and JonBen'et Ramsey, woke up to find JonBen'et missing from her room and a 3-page handwritten ransom note in the house. Then her father found JonBen'et in the basement of the Ramseys' home. She was wrapped in a blanket with her mouth covered, her wrists bound and a cord around her neck. She had died of asphyxiation and a skull fracture. Described as a drifter who frequently wandered the Boulder area, Gary Oliver was reportedly using an address 10 blocks from the Ramseys' home at the time of the murder. On the day JonBen'et's body was found, Vale claims that Oliver called him sobbing and said, "I just heard a little girl." The following day, news broke of the murder. Fearing that Oliver had something to do with the crime, Vale called the Boulder Police Department on December 27th to report the disturbing call he had received from Oliver. But investigators never returned Vale's call, even after Vale followed up months later. Now, this is right when it happens, okay? He gets a phone call before it's even on the newspaper. The night it happened, he gets a call from Gary Oliver telling him he heard a little girl. The next day, he wakes up to the newspaper on his front porch, and it's on the front page. He puts 2 and 2 together, and he calls. No one calls him back. Why? Because they were too worried about the parents and the brother to worry about anyone else. As more information came to light about the murder, Vale became more convinced that Oliver was involved. The garrote used to strangle JonBen'et had been made from a broken paintbrush and a knotted rope, and Oliver had an obsession with knots and art supplies, and apparently cords. 4 years later, in December 2000, Boulder police arrested Gary Oliver on a drug charge. Listen to this. He was found to have a photo of JonBen'et Ramsey in his possession, along with a poem titled Ode to JonBen'et. He also had in his backpack, I don't know when or if they'll say it in this article, a shrine to JonBen'et. And it might have been the picture and the poem. But yes, it is a very scary that so many years later, he's still carrying this around. To me, it's very sus. Investigators also looked through Oliver's backpack and found a stun gun, one of the weapons theorized to have been used in the crime. For the first time since JonBen'et's murder, investigators questioned Oliver about his potential involvement. Initially, he denied having anything to do with it. However, he openly admitted to having an obsession with the child pageant star. I believe that she came to me after she was killed and revealed herself to me. I'd like to see a memorial set up for her. I haven't seen that anywhere. Oliver was cleared of the murder after samples of his DNA were found were not to be samples of his DNA were found not to match DNA found at the crime scene. Got it out. However, very little DNA had been found on the crime scene in the first place. What's more, the police have been accused of failed to properly secure the crime scene after the murder, possibly destroying or contaminating the evidence in the process. And this is a poem and a drawing that he had, you guys. Look how beautiful that drawing is. But this was his poem. In June 2016, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children received a tip from Google that someone in the Boulder area was uploading that. The Gmail account was traced to Oliver. When Boulder police arrested Oliver, they found 695 images on his phone. He also had 335 photographs of and related to JonBen'et, including autopsy photos. Oliver was sentenced to 10 years in prison for possession of child pornography. That word. 3 years later, he was seemingly confessed to being JonBen'et Ramsey's killer. And this is about the letters of the confession. I'm not going to go read that because it's in the video that I want to play for you guys. The video that I have that I made 7 months ago, the volume isn't too well on the jail call. So this is my live 7 months ago. I'm going to go ahead and just play Court TV's. It explains it very well. And here we go. I've been watching them first, so. Oops, hold on. Okay, I just closed out the wrong freaking one. All right, here we go.
Is true. And this has floored me, absolutely floored me once you start digging into some of the details here. And from my perspective, we covered like the Delphi case, and when that was solved after 5 years, we're like, that should have been solved within the first week or two, because the alleged killer was interviewed by someone in a uniform and put himself there, but something happened. I mean, is the same thing happening here, is what I'm wondering tonight. And Take a look at this guy. It's Gary Oliva. This is a guy who's got a history. He's connected to Boulder. He's connected to JonBen'et. And he's writing these letters. And this is, you know, and now we're wondering tonight, did he do it? I mean, everyone's wondering, did he do it? Now, for a little more information on the connection between this man and JonBen'et and Boulder and what happened, we spoke with Luke Kenton.
You will see next on the next video the comparison in the letters and his handwriting is uncanny. It is just, I'm just going to shut up and play it so that you guys can see for you.
Senior reporter for the U.S. Sun, who filled us in on some of the details.
Gary Oliva, first and foremost, is not a good guy. The story involving Gary kind of begins on the 27th of December 1996, when he was reported to Boulder police, because basically the night before, he'd called an old high school friend back in California, who he said through tears and could barely catch his breath, "I've just hurt a little girl." So this was on the night that JonBen'et's body was, a few hours after JonBen'et's body was found on December 26th. He was crying that he'd hurt a little girl in Boulder, and he hung up the phone. Now his friend that was on the other end of the phone didn't know really what to make of that call, was obviously concerned, but couldn't get any information out of him. It wasn't until the next day that he went on the front porch, picked up the newspaper, and saw the news that a 6-year-old girl had been killed in Boulder, Colorado. He immediately calls the Boulder Police Department, reports the call from the day before, and then 3 months pass. He doesn't hear anything, and he calls the tip line again, reports it to Boulder Police, doesn't hear anything again. Fast forward 19 years later, Gary Oliva is in prison for child pornography offences and confesses in a series of letters to the same person that he called that night, claiming to have killed JonBen'et by accident. Hours before it, made headlines across the country, he said, "I've hurt a little girl," and he's in Boulder. And bearing in mind at the time, this guy was was associated with the property about 13 houses away. So he was getting his mail from a church 13 houses away from the Ramsey family. And the tip, like I said, wasn't followed up upon immediately by Boulder police. At the time, they were zeroing on either Patsy or John Ramsey being responsible for JonBen'et's death. It wasn't actually until 4 years later when he was arrested on the campus of the University of Colorado in Boulder. The confession letters were written in and around 2019. There's roughly a dozen of them. One of them I can read you here. I've got it written down below me here. It says, "I never loved anyone like I did JonBen'et, yet I let her slip and her head bashed in half and I watched her die. It was an accident, please believe me." So, he's claiming that he killed JonBen'et.
Did y'all hear that part of the letter? This is sickening. He actually wanted her to not die. That she died by accident, apparently, according to him. But he wanted her to be his wife. Such a little baby. Are you sick? Well, yeah, he is sick.
By accident, whether or not you can take that at face value, who knows? That's for Boulder Police to investigate. They did acknowledge the confession letter when they were first published in 2019, but seemed to kind of brush them under the carpet. They said, we've heard this guy, but I think certainly he's a character that John Ramsey was particularly interested in. I think he's certainly somebody that's worth having a second look at.
Now, we cover trials here at Court TV. So if anyone else had been arrested and charged and put on trial for murder, you would have heard about this guy from the defense. And what was the investigation? What did they really look at? How did they clear this guy who clearly has problems, has a history of this stuff? Now, he may not have done it, but can we take a close look at him? Can we not wait months and years to take a look at him? I want to get reaction tonight from someone who knows the most about all this. Special guest joining us tonight, JonBen'et's father, John Ramsey, is with us. John, thanks so much. Nice to see you tonight. Thank you for joining us. So, you know, for the public, we see the headlines. We're putting two and two together here, and we're like, this seems obvious that this is someone that should really be looked at. How familiar are you with this guy, Gary Oliva?
Well, I'm quite familiar with him. You used the term this person should have been at the top of the radar for the police. Unfortunately, we were at the top of the radar, and they ignored people like this in the beginning. Oliva was referred to us by the Boulder District Attorney for follow-up by our detectives because I think he felt the police would not follow it up properly.
Even Gary was on John's radar. He knew of him. And the police still didn't do nothing because all they wanted to do was blame the parents and the brother and just totally pass Gary by.
And when I heard the circumstantial evidence around this guy, I said to our attorneys, this is the guy. And they said, whoa, don't do a Boulder police on us yet. We don't know that yet. We got a lot of digging to do. So we knew about him early on, and he was certainly right up the top of the list of possible suspects for us. And but there's only so much a private citizen could do in this kind of investigation. And but he's circumstantially, he's very, very compelling as a suspect.
Now,
no question.
There are a lot of people watching who know a lot about this case, but there's a good portion of people who don't know a lot about this case. I want you to follow up on this relationship between you and the Boulder police, because you're saying the district attorney is telling you about this because the DA doesn't believe that the Boulder police will investigate him. Can you give us a little more background on that?
Well, we learned a lot about what went wrong after the fact, several years after the fact in some cases. The Boulder police had no experience in homicide investigations. Their detectives, one of the detectives on the case was an auto theft investigator. And here he is investigating the murder of a child. And I've never faulted them for not having the experience. They're a small town. They don't have homicides, thankfully for them. What I do fault them for is refusing help from competent help that was offered to them early on. And that's the real second tragedy in this case, is that they, because of inexperience, poor leadership, and very arrogant people, refused help. And, we can handle this case. It's our case. And they very quickly concluded, well, it must be the parents. It's always the parents. We just got to assemble the evidence and prove it. And that's what they really set about to do from day one. And the first problem they came up with was unidentified male DNA on JonBen'et's body. And they just kept that information secret from the district attorney and certainly from the media, because it conflicted with their conclusion. And one experienced prosecutor told me, I have never, ever seen a police department try to explain away unidentified male DNA in a sexual assault case. That's what they were trying to do, because they were convinced that we did it. And I was told by the district attorney several years later, their conclusion was based on their opinion that we didn't act right that morning, which is nonsense. But yet that's what drove their conclusion. And they tried desperately to prove it. And it wasn't possible. I mean, our attorneys told us, look, the system's broken. We can't fix the system, but we will promise you one thing: we'll destroy him in court. If this ever goes to trial, don't worry about it. 100% money back guarantee will destroy him because it's absolute nonsense. So, our objective from the very beginning was to get the case into competent hands. And we petitioned the governor, we petitioned the state attorney general, didn't get any response. And it was very frustrating. And what was the date? I don't remember the date, but the new district attorney came in to office and within a year or two took the case away from the Boulder Police and set up a new investigative team. We met with the team and they had the case for several years, 6 or 8 years, and they put together a case file. There was no case file had ever been developed or put together, and they started from scratch. And this, unfortunately, was 4 years after the murder, so it makes it very difficult.
You're playing catch up,
but at least they were trying.
Yeah, you're playing catch up.
Totally playing catch up.
Yeah, they always talk about the first 48 hours. Within the first 48 hours, this friend is allegedly making this phone call to police with this tip. Now, Luke Kenton included this photo I'm showing you right here, folks, from CBS of Gary Oliva at a vigil for JonBen'et. It was in the article in the U.S. Sun. Oliva appears to be in the front row. It's a group paying respect to JonBen'et.
Can't see it too well. It's pretty blurry. I was trying to see if I can get
Ramsey.
clearer.
He also appears to be holding a large folder. Kenton explained a little bit more about when and where this photo was taken earlier this week.
This vigil took place on the year anniversary of her death. So that was on Christmas night. I believe that was held a short distance away from the Ramsey's home. And that picture that we published was actually taken by private investigators hired by John Ramsey, who were investigating Gary at that time, believing him to be a very credible suspect and certainly somebody that's capable of committing such a horrific act. The Boulder police wouldn't look at Gary for another 3 years after that.
Why?
John, let me ask you, do you remember having any interaction with him? Because he seems, he's hanging around Boulder, he's going to vigils, and I don't know if maybe he was even spotted before all of this, before JonBen'et was murdered.
Well, I don't know of any interaction I had with him. I don't recall any. Boulder's got a lot of weirdos walking around. We came to learn, and he was one of them. No. John Douglas, who started the whole FBI crime profiling program, we met with him really for four or 5 days early on, and he pretty quickly said, look, there's no question you guys didn't do this, but his assessment was this was somebody who was angry or jealous of me. And that was a hard pill to swallow. And he said, well, you may not even know him. We were in the paper that couple of weeks before. Our company had achieved a sales milestone, and our marketing lady wanted to put it in the paper. And I had a gut feeling that was a bad idea, but I went ahead and let her do it anyway, because I wanted our employees to be proud of what they'd accomplished. And I don't know if that targeted me, but John Douglas said, this is not about JonBen'et. This was because someone is very angry at you or very jealous of you, and you probably may not even know them. So
in your investigation,
the police asked me early on.
In your investigation, were you able to uncover anything else about Gary Oliva?
No, not really. What we don't know is if the police ever took his DNA and tested it against the sample they got in early 1997.
Well, they said they did, but
so we don't know if that was done. What we've been advocating is, in this Gilgo case I read about really just today, that they assembled a task force to reinvigorate the investigation. And that's really what we're asking the governor to make happen in Colorado. We've been told by the FBI that the government, from the FBI on down, does not have the latest DNA testing technology yet. There are 1 or 2 labs in the country that are cutting edge capable. And they've told us that's where these samples that have not been tested or the old samples that were tested 25 years ago need to go and retest for DNA sampling. And then if we get a good sample result, go to the public genealogy database and develop a family tree and work it backwards. And that's been wildly successful in solving some old cold cases.
Oh, absolutely.
The first one I read, yeah. And we're just advocating that they do those 2 things. Very simple. And yeah, it's a lot of work. We've actually had an unknown benefactor come forward and said, I'll pay for it. If the police and the county and the city have a problem with money, I will pay for it. I don't know who this man is, but it's been offered. So it can't be money. The Boulder police have gone through 3 or 4 chief police heads since this case took place. And only recently did they hire a chief of police from outside the system and an assistant chief from outside the system. And that was a good move in our mind. The culture needed to change. The detective who was on our case for 25 years was recommended for termination by the police review board. He was not terminated. He was put on night patrol, but he was removed from our case. I don't know who within the police department under this new leadership who is even handling our case now, but we need to bring in more resources.
Yeah, and the task force,
I really believe
the task force is exactly how they did it in Long Island. And, within in a case that's decades old or more than a decade old, within a few months, they had their eye on someone. It was amazing, putting the resources plus all the advances in DNA.
No, I am really convinced that this would bring this to a conclusion with that effort made. This Idaho tragedy where 3 students were murdered. First thing I did was look and see how big Moscow, Idaho was, 30,000 people. I thought, oh boy, they're headed for potentially another Boulder, Colorado, where they've got arrogant, we're in charge here, never had any experience doing this, but we'll figure it out. They didn't. They brought in everybody they could get their hands on, the FBI, the state police, and they had it solved within 2 or 3 weeks.
It was amazing.
And boy, I give them credit for doing the right thing. And that's what should have happened in our case.
Absolutely.
And yet that help that was out there and offered was refused.
John Ramsey's going to stay with us. We've got more to talk with him about, including the friend of Aliva, the one who made the call to police, the one who got the letters. What do we know about him? Plus,
out how to watch.
The story involving Gary kind of begins on the 27th of December 1996, when he was reported to Boulder police, because basically the night before he'd called an old high school friend back in California who he said through tears and could barely catch his breath, "I've just hurt a little girl."
To me, that's the key to this whole thing, right? Because remember John Mark Carr, who was, had his own issues, and he had confessed to murdering JonBen'et Ramsey, but it was then determined that he wasn't there, he couldn't have done it, because it's so high profile. Things like that happen, obviously, but it's this phone call that is so crucial, this alleged phone call, right? So July 8th, report from the U.S. Sun. Let me read from it because this is, I think, significant. Now, however, one of his former high school classmates, Michael Vale, is urging Boulder PD to take a second look at Aliva. In addition to what Vale calls Aliva's alarming proximity to the crime scene, is a phone call he received from him on December 27th, just hours after JonBen'et's lifeless body was found. A distressed Aliva told him through frantic and sharp exhales of breath, "I hurt a little girl." That phone call convinces me that Gary's involved. I got a phone call 6 hours before it was in the newspaper from someone in Boulder, 13 houses away, telling me they'd hurt a little girl. I really feel that Gary did this. This is so.
Has any of this changed your opinion on who or what you thought happened to JonBen'et Ramsey yet?
Knows Gary. As we're going back and forth with him, let me bring back in JonBen'et's dad, John Ramsey, who's still with us. John, do you know this guy, Michael Vale? Have you heard of him before and ever had a conversation or spoken to him?
No, I did not know him. I know of him based on this call that he reported, but I've not talked to him either. You know, it's hugely significant if that call was made before the news was public, in my opinion, and that's, I think, I don't know if the Sun has verified that or not, but that is very significant if the call was made before we found JonBen'et and it was reported. You know, we had 2 or 3 other confessions, one of which you mentioned, John Mark Carr, very odd, very compelling confession. The district attorney did arrest him and the DNA did not match. I had another fellow call our minister and say, I want to confess, but first I want to talk to Mr. Ramsey. I talked to him for, gosh, I don't know, an hour probably. And in the end, he said, well, send me money so I can buy airline tickets to fly to Boulder to turn myself in. And I would, was going to take a risk and do it. And my attorney said, no way, we're not sending this guy money. And our investigators checked him out and he was just trying to get me to send him money. And we would have never heard from him again, I suspect. So it wasn't legitimate. Although there was some, anytime, and I've talked to a lot of people on this that callers have information or think they have information. And I'm always looking for that silver bullet, the piece that's not been out in the media. And if they have that, then that's important.
Yeah, and that's, investigators.
So much without the media.
Right. Investigators always try to hold some things back. So when they get the confessions, especially in these high profile cases, that, how only the killer would know that, because we never told anyone that. And I've seen people, caught and prosecuted that way. In this one, though, it seems, if there is an allegation these phone calls were made, I don't know how long phone records are kept. I mean, it's been a long time. If you could put any of this together, at this point, it probably comes down to the credibility of this man, Michael Vale. I want to read some more from the U.S. Sun report. 3 years after his arrest, Oliva penned a series of odd and disturbing letters to Vale claiming to have killed JonBen'et by accident. In one of the letters, which Vale shared with the U.S. Sun, Oliva wrote, I never loved anyone like I did JonBen'et, and yet I let her slip and her head bashed in half, and I watched her die. It was an accident. Please believe me, she was not like the other kids. I guess the other thing about Oliva is he has this history with child pornography and a 7-year-old girl. That is another reason why he seems to be someone who needs to be looked at very, very closely, John.
No, I agree. He was right at the top of my list when I heard the circumstantial information about him. And other than we don't know if the DNA was checked or not, but he's certainly not off my list at all. Now,
the relationship between these two, again, people are wondering, like, who is this guy, Michael Vale? What is the nature of the relationship? Here's a little bit more about that. After graduating high school, and they're both from California, Oliva started writing to Vale, sharing updates about his life, which prompted this exchange of mail between the pair, because back in the old days, we used to send letters to each other. Their correspondence started off innocently enough, but sometime around 1989, the subject of his messages became dark and disturbing, making mention of blood murder, cannibalism, and even child rape. So obviously he's disturbed in some respect. Would you be interested in talking to this guy, Vale, or having hearing from him directly, or do you want to leave that in the hands of investigators at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I'd certainly be willing to, but I think a good investigator would be better equipped to talk to him. I've talked to a lot of people over the years, and I appreciate the interest and the attempt to help. I've got a couple calls right now that I need to return for people that have called and said, I want to talk to you about some information I have. And, I'll always talk to them because you never know.
At this point, I think people who just heard what you said would be, wow, you're still getting calls after all these years. How much, and I know you loved your daughter and, family is like everything, right?
Yeah.
What happened to JonBen'et, how much of this do you carry day in and day out for all these years? I mean, I mean, for us, like, we know, you say the name, we know the story, and we think about it, we can picture her face. I mean, you're her dad. How has this long journey been?
Well, you don't get over the loss of a child as a parent. There's no more painful thing in life for a parent than to lose a child. I've lost 2 daughters, and you don't get over it. You move on. You find a reason to move on. And our primary reason for moving on for Patsy and I was we still had 3 children that loved us dearly and needed us to be strong. And Patsy and I used to say, when we'd both get down and just really depressed, but okay, wait, let's not have a pity party here. Let's get up off the floor and get moving. And so we were fortunate that we both had that perspective, I guess. A majority of marriages end up in divorce after the loss of a child like this. There's the question of blame. Well, why did you let Jimmy have the car that night? I told you that was a bad idea. Or why did you let your daughter go out? Or why didn't you check the locks? There's a blame. And then also just you get stuck in a valley of just sadness, and it's tough to get out of. But we had 3 children that needed us, that were alive and needed us to be strong. And that's really why I'm fighting so hard to get the government to do the right thing here. Finding JonBen'et's killer is not going to change my life. It's going to close a chapter. But it's going to change the lives of my children and my grandchildren. This chapter needs to be closed for their sake. And that's the primary. I dealt with this early on, and I told people, I said, I knew that if you put me in the room with this creature, we wouldn't need a trial. He wouldn't come out alive, and I would have no remorse. And I knew that was not the right thing to think, but that's how I felt. And then it took me 3 or 4 or 5 years to deal with the whole concept of forgiveness. How do you forgive? And I went through several iterations of progress to that, and I realized that forgiveness is really a gift you give yourself. It's a release from that anger and desire for revenge. Do I still want absolute justice for this creature? Yes. But I let my life move on. And that's what really forgiveness is. It's a gift you give yourself.
All right, John Ramsey's going to stay with us. When we come back, we'll talk about the scene. We'll return to the scene and talk about how could someone get inside the house? Where in the house was JonBen'et found? We'll get into some of those details when we return. JonBen'et found. We'll get into some of those details when we return. The next episode of Accomplice to Murder.
December 26, 1996. A brisk, clear morning in Boulder, Colorado. John Ramsey was up before dawn.
Well, I was shaving, I guess, in the bathroom.
And we have a back staircase from the bedroom areas. And I always come down that staircase, and I'm usually the first one down. And the note was lying across the run of one of the stair treads. And it was kind of dimly lit because it was very early in the morning. And I started to read it, and it was addressed to John.
A terrifying message scrawled across 3 pages.
It said, "We have your daughter."
I just heard Patsy scream. I could tell by her scream that something horrible was going on. I didn't know what.
I immediately ran back upstairs and pushed open her door, and she was not in her bed.
I want you to take a look at the neighborhood again and take a look at the Ramsey's home in Boulder, Colorado. Beautiful town. You know, it's a place where you think you would feel safe, right? You think you would feel safe, but JonBen'et was not safe. We've also learned that the man who has allegedly written these letters confessing to all of this was living on the streets and sleeping in the streets of Boulder. 13 houses away is where he would pick up mail. I mean, he was connected to this neighborhood. Why is he not looked at more closely is the question we're taking a look at tonight. John Ramsey is still with us. John, again, I preface this by saying there's a lot of people who know a lot about this story who are watching, but there's some who don't know a lot. How could the killer have gotten into the house? What sort of conclusions have you come to in your mind?
Well, it was an old house. It was built in 1927. It had been added on to by previous owners, so it was kind of a mishmash of rooms and doors and windows. And you know, as you said, we thought we lived in a very peaceful, safe community, and we were naive. And so we didn't check every door to make sure that they were locked. We didn't lock every window and check the locks. That day, the 25th, kids are in and out of the house all day long, playing with new toys, and, you know, their friends were over, and, you know, it wouldn't have been difficult. I did, when the police asked me to go through the house and see if I could find anything out of the ordinary, I went to the basement, and there was a window that was open, and one of the panes of glass was broken, and there was a suitcase under the window propped up as if it were a step. And I told the police that morning, I said, look, I think I broke the window last summer. I was locked out. I had to get in the house. That was the way I got in. But that window should not have been unlocked and open as it was, because it was the middle of winter. And more importantly, the suitcase didn't belong there. It was out of place. It was put up, set under the window as if it were a stepping, you know, stool to get out the window. And I told the police that very early on. And so that certainly was one way that possibly could have provided an entrance or exit. There was also a door found wide open, which I didn't know about. But it was found by the police when they came that morning. The bottom floor of that house had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 doors, 5 doors to the outside. And just because of the way it was built and how it evolved over time. And one of those doors was found wide open. It was an out of the way door, but it was on the side of the house. So, and we didn't set the burglar alarm. We just thought we were safe. JonBen'et set off the burglar alarm when we first moved in. It was one of these alarms that the theory was it was so loud you couldn't stand to be in the house, and it would make the burglar flee. Well, she set it off, punching the buttons, and it went off one Friday afternoon, and it was horrible. It was just this blasting sound, and I ran into where the keyboard was. She says, "This makes my ears loud." Yeah, it's pretty loud. So we didn't use it, and we didn't think we needed it. But boy, we were naive. We were ignorant of the eccentric characters that lived in Boulder. There were a lot of them.
Certainly. And I guess the last thing, and I think a lot of viewers are probably thinking this now too. So there's the letter that's left, and there's this guy, Gary Leva, who apparently writes a lot of letters. Do you know if there's ever been a comparison done in the handwriting?
Not to my knowledge, and that's should be done. I mean, we were told by legitimate handwriting experts with the 3-page ransom note, that's a huge sample, and we can positively identify the writer with that much sample. And I don't know if that's ever been done with Oliva.
All right. Well, John,
it was done. Patsy and I did all that.
You did it, right? They had you do a bunch of them, right?
Yeah, we wrote that out, left upside down, right-handed, left-handed, for samples,
Right. Well, John,
So-
I appreciate you coming on tonight. These headlines, I guess you got a couple calls you've got to return. People still calling you with information. And let's just hope that someday when we're talking again, we're talking about a trial. John Ramsey, thanks so much.
Yes, sir.
Sixth, 1996, 6-year-old JonBen'et Ramsey was found dead in her family's home in Boulder, Colorado. Her parents, John and Patsy Ramsey, had reported her missing early that morning. Patsy Ramsey found a lengthy, handwritten ransom note in the house addressed to her husband, John. About 7 hours after police arrived to investigate the kidnapping, JonBen'et's body was found hidden behind a latched door in the basement of the home. And now, a convicted pedophile has written incriminating letters. His name is Gary Oliva. Tonight, we will take a look at those letters and the original ransom note with our experts to see if the handwriting is a match. Plus, we'll speak live with the man who received those letters from Oliva as we investigate the unsolved murder of JonBen'et Ramsey.
I'm Vinny Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Get ready. This hour, we're going to take a look at some information, some evidence, and try to see if there's anything that gets us closer to an answer in the JonBen'et Ramsey case. And, this is an unsolved case, and it's one of those murders where everyone has a theory, right? A lot of people have theories and have thrown them out through the years, from DAs to investigators to podcasters to people producing specials on TV. So many have taken a look at the evidence that's been made public and revealed. And so many have gone in different directions with all of it. They have. I mean, they're even within law enforcement, there were like 2 schools of thought on what happened to this little girl. Now, like I said, everyone has theories, and there have been some relatively recent, and I say relatively recent, this is a very old case, but relatively recent television programs that have taken a look at it. And in one particular case, at the end of the program, it seemed like there was a conclusion by the experts who looked at this that it was someone within the family. That resulted in a defamation case, which, trust me, was not won by the network that produced the show. There was a settlement in that case. That didn't necessarily resolve anything, but that's the way this case has gone, right? People have been very passionate about their views. And John Ramsey and the family from the beginning said, no, it's not us. It's not us. But there was a lot of focus on the family from the beginning. And that may have thrown this whole thing off the tracks a little bit because we still don't have an answer. Like, how could you focus on a certain set of suspects from the beginning, yet never come up with enough evidence to bring them into a courtroom? And I know,
because that's all they were worried about. John, Patsy. Oh my gosh, I just forgot his name. Bert.
that the original prosecutor had gone after him, looked like things were moving in that direction, but it didn't end up that way. Didn't end up that way. Now, I remember at court, when I was at court TV early on in my career at court TV, there was a huge moment when John Mark Carr, who was this guy, this bizarre man, made this confession, and everyone thought, this is it. This is it. Brought him back from overseas. I think he was in Thailand. He had confessed to all of this, was brought into court. At the time, it was the biggest moment in the history of court TV, the first time that he was brought into a courtroom here in the United States. And it turned out that that was a false confession. You know, they looked at him, they looked at where he was, what he knew, everything, and the pieces just didn't fit. Trust me, they wanted the pieces to fit, but they didn't. And in high-profile cases, you will get false confessions. It's par for the course. It happens. That's why investigators always hold back some information that presumably only the killer would know. So when they get all these confessions, they can somehow corroborate or verify that, oh yeah, you know, he or she knew something that nobody else knew in this case. That wasn't the case with John Mark Carr. So now we're dealing with this other confession. I know it's been making the rounds for a while, but it's a guy named Gary Oliva. All right? He likes pictures of little kids, okay? Child pornography. We know that for a fact, okay? So that gets him into the, you know, into the sphere of people who could potentially be responsible for all this. Now, he's written a series of letters, including ones where he has admitted taking the life of JonBen'et Ramsey. He's in custody right now. But he sent these letters, and the question is this for real? Is this a real confession, or the deranged mind of a man making a false confession, like John Mark Carr did years ago? And that's what we're going to look at tonight on this show. That's what we're going to look at, and get the backstory and get some facts, and try to put the pieces together here. So let's begin with the letter. He wrote a letter to a friend of his, a friend, acquaintance, former classmate. His name is Michael Vale. And in that letter, he wrote, "I never loved anyone like I did JonBen'et, and yet I let her slip and her head bashed in half, and I watched her die. It was an accident." Okay? That's one of many letters that Gary Oliva has written through the years, this to Michael Vale. So I want to get the backstory on this man, Gary Oliva, and the friend, classmate he was writing to. What's the story behind the letter, behind this confession? And so joining me tonight, folks, from Ventura, California, the man who received those letters from Gary Oliva is former classmate, Michael Vale. Michael, I just didn't know how to describe it. I didn't want to say friend, but like he's sending you letters, and I know classmate, acquaintance. How would you describe your relationship now and years ago with this man, Gary Oliva?
Well, really, there's three parts to that story. The first part would be pre-96. The second part, then there would be 96, and then anything after 2016. But in the beginning, I went to a very small high school, and everybody knew everybody there. And Gary was what we called an orbiter. He just would orbit around our groups and stuff. So we were classmates. We knew everybody at school. There's probably 75 to 100 kids there at any given time. It was a rather small school.
Okay, so you describe him as an orbiter. Was he always a little different? Was there always did you and your classmates sense that one of these classmates is not like the other?
Well, we didn't really. We were just kids. We didn't really know about that stuff. I didn't have any idea. We have a naivety, at the time, being just young kids. But of course, we knew there was something wrong with Gary. In fact, we called him Scary Gary. He was known for breaking into places and getting art supplies. I mean, he could break in and steal things, but he was definitely into stealing art supplies and things of that nature. When I heard about the paintbrush, things like that. There's so many points that I have here. I have 25 points of what I would call circumstantial evidence.
Okay, let's get to that in just a minute. I just want to focus on how we got to these letters. So let's start with when does he start writing to you, and what is the sort of the nature of the communication, and is it a back and forth, or is it a sort of a one-way street here?
Well, right after high school, I went off, got married, went to college, all that good stuff, and Gary stayed in touch with the mail, the U.S. mail. Believe it or not, back then that's how we stayed in touch.
Mail.
I was taking a TV and radio course, and I had access to this fantastic studio. So I was making these funny cassette tapes with all their sound effects and stuff. And I popped, Gary was one of the guys I popped on one of these cassette tapes. Well, he loved it. He mailed me back a cassette tape. And this went on for years, I'm going to say 16 years, getting cassette tapes and things from him and really not talking by telephone, which made that phone call in 96, very more.
Okay, so let's get to the phone call in 1996. This is when you say everything changes, and we know this is when JonBen'et is murdered. So what was this phone call like? When was it, and what was said?
It was December 26th. It was almost midnight on the 27th. It would have been the morning of the 27th. Well, all of a sudden, it was the happiest time of my life. It really was. I just bought a house. I married my high school sweetheart, ironically, right? And then, things were going so great. And so my family went to sleep, and I remember it. You remember a phone call you get that's terrifying. You remember it. You remember the room you're in when you get that phone call. And I remember with the Christmas tree and everything. It was December 26th, and it was about midnight. And I get that phone call, and it's Gary's voice, and he's like, oh, I just heard, little girl, like it was the most terrifying. I'm getting goosebumps just now telling you guys this because it was terrifying, and I immediately jumped into protective mode. Oh, where are you? What's your address? What's your phone number? And he kind of caught on to me, but he told me he was in Boulder. When I was like, Boulder? Why would you be in Boulder? You've been sending me mail for 16 years from Oregon, and now you're suddenly in Boulder calling me. Anyway, he hung the phone up when I'm trying to get information, and that was the phone call. Well, here's the scariest part. The next morning, I get to the LA Times on the newspaper on my front porch. It's 6, 7 in the morning. I flip the newspaper open, and there it is on the back side. It says, girl 6 slain in Boulder, Colorado. And I knew something serious had happened that night. I go, wow, he actually killed the girl. And that's when I called that number. Right then and there, I called that phone number. And I sat back, and, when you call the police, they're going to do something, right? I mean, that's their job. They investigate tips, right? And here's my solid gold tip. But I sit back, I'm telling my wife, any day they're going to arrest Gary, watch this, it's going to be incredible. And then all of a sudden, like every day would go by, and there's no phone call. I mean, the police never followed up. So after 3 months, I called them a second time. And I said, look, I need to tell you, I've got a really good lead for the John. Now I knew her name was JonBen'et. And I said, I got a lead for the JonBen'et murder. And they said, okay, let me put you through to the JonBen'et line, quote unquote, the crazy person line, right? Because by now, thousands of people had called, thousands of, who knows, my tip got buried in there.
Fail number 1. The day after it happens, they get this lead and they just brush it off. Why? Because they're so worried about the parents and the brother. That's why.
Who knows what happened? I'm still thinking Gary's going to be arrested any day. You talked about John Mark Carr earlier. And let me tell you something. I knew when John Mark Carr got arrested, I knew that I was like, what is this? I mean, I know Gary did this. I know who killed JonBen'et.
So never any response from police. You make the initial call, you make the second call. Did they ever get back to you?
No, the Boulder police never contacted me until the TV show 48 Hours and Lou Smith followed up. And actually Alex Hunter, the district attorney for Boulder, Colorado at the time, drove out to my apartment in Ventura. And I gave him evidence of some of those scary things that Gary had mailed me over the years. We're talking handwriting samples. We're talking hair from missing kids posters, really scary stuff that he had started telling me, sending me. What I forgot to tell you is that over the 16 years, the things he had sent me got darker and darker until it was like including tape recordings where he's simulating a rape of a child and really horrible things like that. So, yeah, it was getting pretty scary. And then 96 happened, and I knew that he had done something very serious.
So when do you get a letter where because over the phone, I would consider that a confession too, right? I hurt this girl. He says he's in Boulder, right? So that's one part. When do you start getting letters or the letter where he purports to confess to the murder itself?
Right. It's an interesting story because in May of 2016, I had had enough. I had found Gary's Pinterest page. It was basically a trophy page to JonBen'et. There was 65 photos of JonBen'et in there, and I just went livid. So I thought, what can I do to help this case along? What can I do? And here it was 2016. So I wrote I have a friend who's an FBI agent, sent her a 3-page email. She said, don't worry, I'll take care of it. Within a month, Gary was arrested, and he's got a undetermined sentence. And he's still in prison.
And still in prison now. I mean, the guy clearly has issues and has problems. And the question is he the one responsible for all of this? So you get the letter from him. What do you do with the letters once he starts confessing to you through these letters?
No, the way that happened is that within a month he was arrested, and I was like, oh wow, it was like a backpack full of rocks. It was like relief. I finally was free from worrying about Gary loose in society. It was the best feeling in the world. And I thought that was enough. That's what I needed, right? And then, but what happened was somebody said, hey, why don't you write Gary a letter? An idea. So I started sending Gary's letters. To my surprise, he started sending them back. And I tried everything to try to get him to talk about his life and just about everything, about how this got to this point, and about JonBen'et and his obsession with JonBen'et. We talked about every detail. And then, what happened is I couldn't get enough details from the letters, so I had him start to call me on the telephone and recording those calls.
Now, Michael, I understand that you just got another letter today.
Oh, yeah.
From Gary Leva?
Yeah, matter of fact, I do have a letter still sealed right here. It's dated July 31st.
Do you mind opening it and tell us what Gary has to say tonight?
I sure do. I sure do. And I got to tell you, we've got some amazing details coming up. We have a new private investigator that's working with us, and it's really helping this case along. I'm very excited. Okay, so I'm opening this, as you can see. I'm sorry, I should have done that on the. Okay, this is a very, very detailed letter. I haven't reviewed this, but as you can see, let me just approve this, make sure it's okay. It says generosity brings psychological benefits. It's some clipping from it's interesting, you know, the things that he sent me. And now he's kind of changed his handwriting even more, and he writes very small. And, you know, I'll spare you guys. I won't read this to you, but it's been quite a journey for 27 years. Trying to keep
just give us a small flavor of what he wrote, if you could read a couple lines from it.
In the garden, there are patches where others have dumped things of little value that need clearing out and tilled ready for planting, that are patches where no matter one tries to grow, a surface then dies. It never takes hold. Needs the right nutrients. That's where the patches are. The things never get planted at the right time. So you must keep replanting. So just bizarre.
Bizarre stuff, but I mean, this case is still unsolved. There's a purported confession. What we're doing here tonight is taking some of the letters that you've provided, and there's the original ransom note in the JonBen'et case, which everyone believes the killer wrote, right? So we're going to compare the handwriting from the letters. Got some experts coming on in the next segment. We'll take a look at that. And then I know you have that list, okay? I'm going to get to the lists. Before we finish here this hour, we're going to get to your list as well. So Michael Vale, former classmate of Gary Oliva, staying with us. We're going to compare those letters. We've got a lot to get to, plus coming up next hour.
In Nassau on the Bahamas, angle and divorce turned into an alleged murder for hire plot. Lindsay.
The run of one of the stair treads, and it was kind of dimly lit because it was very early in the morning. And I started to read it, and it was addressed to John.
A terrifying message scrawled across 3 pages.
This is where they're going to compare his handwriting to the ransom note.
It said, "We have your daughter."
A lot of things didn't make sense. Why would they leave a ransom note with her body still in the house?
My first impression was that this guy wrote the Magna Carta.
You will withdraw $118,000 from your account.
If I were kidnapping this guy's daughter, I'd ask for $250,000, $500,000, $1 million. So the amount of money is just really odd to me.
This ransom note from the beginning has been baffling, but I think most people agree it's connected to the killer. And probably, I mean, if it's not the killer, then who would have written this, right? Like, why would you write that note? But it wasn't even a kidnapping. It was a murder. She was still in the house. So take a look at the ransom note. This is, one of the most significant pieces of evidence in the case, and yet they haven't been able to connect anyone to it. So we've got Gary Oliva confessing in a letter and writing tons of letters to Michael Vale. So what we want to do is compare Gary Oliva's letter to the ransom note to say, hey, are there consistencies here? Does it look like the same person could have or did write these 2 letters? So let's bring in our guest. Still with us, Gary Oliva's former classmate, Michael Vale. Also joining us tonight, helping us a lot with all this in Salt Lake City, private investigator and great friend of the show, Jason Jensen, and helping us analyze these documents, forensic handwriting experts Moselle Martin and Dawn McCarty. Great to have everyone here. Thank you so much. And I got to let everyone know, Jason Jensen is putting all this together and helping us so much. Appreciate Jason. But I'm going to go right to the experts, if you don't mind, who you helped put all this together. So I want to take a look at sort of like a layover kind of comparison that Moselle did. We have something we could put on the screen here, which compares the TH, the IF, the U, and some of the words here. Moselle, why don't you begin to explain this and what it tells you?
Well, for me, it's really about the nuances, the little things that are not common. It's important to look at the common similarities as well, but it's also important to look at the uncommon things. For example, a lot of the people who are at home armchair sleuths, they will look at it and say, oh, well, it doesn't visually look the same. But if you can, everybody kind of learned the same way in school to a certain extent. And so there's going to be some commonalities. So when you overlay them, though, some of these weird little strokes that are awkward, that are not common, like a little bend in the T stem or an arch in the H, those are unique to that individual. So when you overlay them, they line up so well. That's a really loud announcement in my profession.
Okay, Dawn, let's start going through some of the letters now. Let's start. This is like going back to school with the letter A and the comparison of the A. So what did you find in this comparison of the letter A? I think we're going to put it up on the screen. Do we have it? Here we go. All right. Tell us what we're looking at.
Sure. So when you look at these, you might think at first, oh, these don't look the same. One starts and one's, on a upward slant to curve over. However, if you lay these two over, if you take the blue A and you lay it over the black A, it almost lines up in that arch that bends around. You can see how they line up a little bit. And then there's also an indentation on that right-hand side, which I think is on another slide later, that you can see in the same location on both sides, both documents. Those nuances or the anomalies exist. And that's what we're really looking for is it's easy to spot things that are similar, but what we're really looking for is those things that aren't really obvious, but we can still find. So that's why we really dig in and take our time with these analysis and dig up a little bit more or dig through them a little bit more so we can find those similarities and the dissimilarities, because we want to have a broad analysis. We want to know what's different. And then we also want to know, okay, so how many traits are similar so that we can stack those traits? Because like Moselle said, some of us are going to have very similar writing because we learned in schools that taught us how to write the same letters. So that aside, as we grow, we start creating or start developing our own style, and our own personality comes out into our writing, where you can see someone else's handwriting and recognize, okay, yeah, that's my mom's handwriting. So that's what we're looking for beyond that. What else is in that writing that is unique to both documents?
So let's go through some more letters. Go through the letter C now. Let's take a look. Moselle, what are your thoughts about the C's?
Well, it's very interesting because the C's and the E's, if you just looked at those letters of Gary's, a lot of them resemble an E. But we have to look at, we have two different writing instruments. We have a Sharpie and we have an ink pen. So when you're comparing them, you're automatically going to have some residual stroking of the Sharpie, because it does automatically bleed into the paper weave a lot differently than the ink would sit on it. However, you can still see when you overlay them the same strokes, the angles, the hooks, the exits. They are still there, even though we have different writing instruments.
Let's go to the D's. Dawn, that's your first letter of your name. What do you think of the D's?
So what's significant about these D's, if you look how they're both written on each side, they start at the top. And now at the top on the question document, you see that black dot. That's because it's a Sharpie pen, and that ink is flowing as soon as it makes contact with the paper. So both these Ds start at the top and they go all the way around and form that circle without stopping. There's no straight stem going down and then up and creating the loop. The stem goes down and continues on and wraps around to form that D on the top one. On the bottom one, you can see how both of these traits are like a little loop. So it's not a pure circle. Both, again, exist in both documents.
Moselle, we have here two L's together. Let's take a look at that and tell me what you think.
The L's, I was so excited when I saw the L's because it just has so much difference in the visual aspect of it. But when we overlay them, I was so excited. I yelled at my husband and I said, you have to see these L's, and he doesn't know anything about handwriting. But when you overlay them, there's just no denying that they are made with the same stroke. It has the same, the same bend in the stems. It has the same spacing between the stems that also line up. So they are very distinct.
Dawn, take a look at the M's now. Let's go to the M's.
So when you look at these M's, you're going to say that they don't look alike.
So far, I want to know your opinion on the writing analysis and everything that we heard before on the previous video. Does this change your mind in any way on Gary being possible suspect?
Like these ones are shorter in the middle where that you have the peaks and the valleys. But when you overlay them, you can still see that the spacing is the same. And that's what we look for also. So it's not just about, is the points exactly the same? There's not going to, especially when you're looking at disguised writing, which obviously the ransom note is disguised writing. So it's not going to look exactly the same. However, when you lay these over, you can see how they do line up as far as the spacing goes.
That's the O's and the O's, or the O's and the zeros? The O's and the zeros. Let's take a look here. What are you seeing here?
So for me, one of the big things I always look for when I'm analyzing a question document is I am looking for entrance and exit strokes. Where do they start? Where do they end? How do they meet and connect? And after they complete, what shape are they? So when we overlay these, it's just, again, again, it's just, how do you deny this?
It's unbelievable. And finally, Dawn, we've got some numbers and symbols here we're going to take a look at as well, which I guess are a little more unique. What's significant here?
So at first glance, you're going to look at the 1997 and you're going to see some wobbliness and some heavier ink at the bottom, the base of the 9, but you have to remember that that is written with a Sharpie pen. So you're going to see more of that than you may have if it was written with a ballpoint pen. So when you look at the 9s on the right and you lay those over the 9s in the middle, sort of, and I think we do have an overlay on this one. I'm not sure if it's going to play, but those 9s line up. They're just a little bit shorter. And then the double 9s also line up. So that the .99 on the right side of the known sample is actually the 99-cents piece of the 1999. And it still lines up in over these other 99s to where they're centered and still within the same spacing, more or less. And then the 7, of course, that top bar across the top is nearly the same length. And then both of them come down almost straight before the blue 7 bends a little bit and before the 7 gets a little wobbly. But you can still, when those are overlaid, they're pretty similar.
Okay, so let's get to the bottom line here now. So, Moselle, I'll begin with you. I'm not familiar. What's the standard when you compare? Is it like more likely than not inconsistent with, or what's your conclusion?
So for me, I use a 5-point scale, which basically 5 would say, absolutely, there's no way possible this person could have written this. And in my opinion, again, this is just my opinion. So for this, I would be at about a 1.75. I would love to have seen more handwriting, but we can only work with what we have access to. But based on everything that I looked for and looked at, I had dozens and dozens of samples.
5 is it probably didn't do it. 1 is probably very close. And her opinion is 1.75. Wow.
Of Gary's. I started at 250, went up to 225, then was at a 2, and then ended at 175.
So what does 175 mean again?
Means pretty close to certain, but you can never say 100%.
Right. So it's very close. Okay. So Dawn,
very close.
What was your conclusion?
So I started out more at a 3-4 in the very beginning because I didn't do the deep dive. I was still just did a peer review. And the more I started digging into it, the more I started doing the overlays, I could see more significance in the similarity. And it's a compelling argument that there's a lot of anomaly. And I was on a 2 for a little while, but those O's and some of the numbers, the A's that have a little indentation that exists in both documents, they were a little convincing. So I'm between a 175 and a 2. So in my opinion, it's plausible.
Wow. Fascinating stuff. I appreciate you coming on and sharing that with us. Pretty amazing. So I thank you, Moselle Martin and Dawn McCarty. Jason Jensen's going to stay with us. Can't wait to hear what he has to say about all of this. And of course, Mike Vale, I know you've got your list. I want to hear that list. We've got all that coming up. Don't go anywhere, folks. Wow.
Familiar with him. You used the term, this person should have been at the top of the radar for the police. Unfortunately, we were at the top of the radar, and they ignored people like this in the beginning. Oliva was referred to us by the Boulder District Attorney for follow-up by our detectives because I think he felt the police would not follow it up properly.
Wow. The police detective told John's detective to follow up on it. Wow.
And when I heard the circumstantial evidence around this guy, I said to our attorneys, this is the guy. And they said, whoa, don't do a Boulder police on us yet. We don't know that yet. We got a lot of digging to do. So we knew about him early on, and he was certainly right up at the top of the list of possible suspects.
In my opinion, this could have been solved right away if they would have just done their job and left the family alone and also paid attention to other leads.
That was John Ramsey. The last time we talked about this, he said, Gary Lee was on the top of our list, but the Boulder police were focused on the Ramseys.
Yep.
Like that's part of the history of this case. Here's what the Boulder police told us today. Because this is an active and ongoing investigation, I'm unable to answer any specific questions about this crime. That's a 27-year active investigation without a ton of activity. But there were prior statements, like in 2019, the Boulder Police Department said they were aware of Gary Oliva and has investigated his potential involvement in the case, including several previous confessions. The department routinely receives information on investigation. Information provided to the police department is reviewed along with the many tips and theories we receive. Right? So they know about him, but what's going on here? Let's bring back in our guests, Michael Vale, Jason Jensen, still with me. Jason, let me start with you. What are your thoughts tonight, right? You put all this together, handwriting experts, and it seems like they're pretty confident that this is consistent, that it could, in fact, be the same person.
Right. Thanks, Vinny, for having us tonight. I mean, I know that Court TV has been covering this story for many, many years, and so we were excited to share the results of our one-year independent investigation thus far. So, yeah, when we learned of the similarities of Gary's handwriting, we thought this was significant in light of the fact that, you know, the handwriting of Patsy Ramsey was really instrumental in building their case against the Ramseys initially. So even though that the scaling was 4.5 or 5, which was a complete elimination or mostly eliminating for both of them, they still emphasize the Ramseys as being key to, discovering what happened to JonBen'et that night. But with such a low score in favor of Gary, we think we're onto something. And the only thing that they've ever said was in response to the 48 Hours Investigates episode was that DNA eliminated Gary in 2002. But what we know back then, their sole emphasis was the Ramseys. So we questioned in our investigation whether that was a sincere elimination of Gary by DNA.
All right, Michael, let me, and by the way, in these big cases, I think you have to take law enforcement with a grain of salt. We learned that in the Delphi murders. The suspect who gets arrested overlooked. They knew about him right from the beginning. The Long Island serial killer should have been an arrest within months in that case, but police were doing whatever they were doing there. So, you got to take it with a grain of salt. So, Michael, I know you are involved in all this. And what's your list? Everyone that's watching is like, Vinny, will you let him give us the list? So what's your list that you have for us tonight?
Well, number one is the direct evidence. I've always known who killed JonBen'et. And the fact is that phone call. That phone call and my fact that I called the police the next morning, there's a record of that. And this is a documented direct evidence. Now, that right there, to me, here's how I feel. Everybody's saying there's a mystery about who killed JonBen'et. But to me, that's not the mystery. The mystery is why Gary hasn't been arrested for this. Okay, let me go on to the circumstantial evidence for you. And thank you for a great program, by the way. Gary had the means, the access, the history, and the criminal history. He was on the run for, it's hard to say, what he was doing to a little girl in Oregon. He was on the run from the law for that when JonBen'et was killed in '96. Anyway, he had a fascination with knots in high school, with cords, knots. It's in his collages. It's in his artwork. Then also he attempted to strangle his own mother with a telephone cord. Tried to kill his own mother and told her, hey, I should have killed you years before. And then, of course, we know how JonBen'et was killed, unfortunately, with a cord. It's really tough to talk about. The proximity of Gary is what's really alarming here. We're not talking about somebody across town. We're talking about somebody right down the alley. Unlucky 13 houses. Very unlucky 13 houses down that same alley. And when you look on Google Satellite, you can see how those trees cover that alley and anybody can sneak through there unknown, undetected. Anyway, boy, that gave me goosebumps right now. 13 houses away. He was getting his mail there in a church, 13 houses down. I could get into that, but we only have another half hour. He has an obsession with JonBen'et. Well, hey, we all know that. You've seen the drawings, right? We know. I'm going to skip number 6. We'll get to that later. But number 7, he was a creeper in school. In high school. Also breaking into Caltech Pasadena, breaking into UC Boulder. He was actually arrested on the campus with a poem to JonBen'et and photographs and artwork of JonBen'et.
Michael, let me do this, Michael. Just stay where you are. We're going to take a short break, and then we'll finish up on the other side. We had something else we were going to do. We're not going to do it. We're going to stay on this. Jason Jensen, Michael Vale, staying with us. We'll be right back. Plus, coming up next hour.
In Las Vegas, Nevada, the widower Thomas Randolph is accused of hiring.
Welcome back. I want to preserve as much time for our guests. We're talking about the murder of JonBen'et Ramsey. Michael Vale's with us. Jason Jensen's with us. Michael Vale, former classmate of Gary Oliva, got all these letters. Michael, when we went to break, you were going through your list of circumstantial evidence that you have come up with that would implicate Gary Oliva. Let me just ask you, did police ever ask for your phone records, or did they ever get your phone records to verify that you got that call from Oliva? No, of course not. Why would you do that?
That was to a landline.
Yeah. Exactly. So go ahead, continue with your list and try to, we have 2 minutes exactly. So see if you can save like 20 seconds for Jason Jensen at the end.
Yeah, thank you to Jason Jensen. He's been doing a fantastic job, and he talked about DNA, and that's on my list. You have to look into the science of DNA in 1996. I mean, it could be touched her somebody in the mortuary actually when it's DNA. So we have to look at this. What I've been told since the very beginning, so we all know that. That's a fact. Now, real quick, he broke into schools for art supplies, and she was killed with a paintbrush from Patsy art room. Now, he slept in the campus of Boulder. He signed the ransom note is signed SBTC. Well, they had a breakthrough with single band truncated crystal that year, University of Boulder. Amazing. Jason did an amazing job putting that together. He called me 6 hours before it was in the news. Come on. We was on the run for molesting a girl in Oregon. He had mailed me missing girl posters. It was very terrifying to get that. He had a fascination with 6-year-old kids. I don't know why he locked into 6-year-old kids, but the eyeballs on forks. Now we take the digital spin. He's a cannibal. I guess if you eat human skin of a child, I guess that would make you a cannibal. So he's confessed to me on a prison interview phone call that he tasted children's skin. He wanted to eat JonBen'et, also something he told me. Anyway, I could go on this list. We only had 2 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. And I appreciate it. Jason Jensen, so what happens next? Where do we go from here?
Well, at this point, I've certainly updated John Ramsey, and I've also offered our evidence to Boulder PD, and I'm still waiting to hear them back.
All right. I wouldn't hold my breath on that one. For many reasons, I don't understand how this whole thing, why it hasn't been widened, bring in the FBI, everybody else, all boots on the ground. Didn't happen in this case. Michael Vale, thank you for your time tonight. Thank you for sharing everything. Jason Jensen, amazing as always. We really do appreciate it.
Okay, friends, that's all that I have for you today. Please let me know if any of the information you heard today changes your opinion on Gary and his possible involvement in the crime. When I first heard it 7 months ago, I know it definitely did change mine. I will be back in an hour and 15 minutes with some trivia to get away from all of this sadness and bad news. I hope to see you all then. Have a wonderful day, and I'll be back.